All right, so we're talking chapter 4 now, and because of time and because of just kind of the organization of the class, we are only going to be doing the labor market part of chapter 4. All right, so we're only going to be covering the labor market part of chapter 4 so that we can get into elasticity, not get too far behind. We will deal with financial markets again, either in macroeconomics, which you will be taking, or later on in this course if we have time for it. So for all intents and purposes, you only need to know the first half of the chapter 4 information. So when we're talking about labor markets, right, we now have the situation flipped, right, where we, the households, are the ones that are supplying our time and energy into the market, right? We are the ones that are now the suppliers. We're used to businesses, Walmart and Amazon and other places like that being suppliers. In the labor market, we are the ones supplying our time and energy, and the demand from labor comes from employers. So employers are on the demand side of the situation. And we're told that, let's say the equilibrium wage for nurses is $70,000. Well, if places are coming in and trying to hire workers at, let's say, $60,000, there is going to be a demand for labor that far outstrips the supply of labor. So this is part of the reason why we have a nursing shortage, right? That the equilibrium wage is higher than a lot of what the starting wages are. And so as a result, the people that are willing to work in this particular nurse market, right? The people that have the qualifications and are willing to work there, the quantity supplied of labor is going to be way fewer than the quantity demanded of labor. So we end up with a shortage. And the only way for employers to fix this shortage is to increase the equilibrium, increase the starting wage or the wage that they're willing to offer until they get to that equilibrium wage. They could also offer, extra benefits, tuition reimbursement, healthcare, matching 401k, so on and so forth, right? But for for this analysis, we're really trying to just keep it simple. Now, when we talk about labor markets, just as with regular regular product and service markets, we have shifters of supply and demand. Our supply shifters are going to be, does it require an education, right? If all of a sudden nurses, needed to have an extra year of college or something like that, right? Then the supply of labor would shrink. Now, what if they dropped the requirements, right? And they said that, we have a 6-month accelerated program or something like that, and then you can, take your whatever it is, LP or RN test or whatever, right? If they lowered the required education requirements, then we would expect there to be a increase in the supply of that particular labor, right? So, something like being a professor, right? You have to have a lot of education, master's degree, and have, experience teaching and stuff like that, right? So, the supply of labor is usually pretty low in terms of when, employers are out there trying to hire people, right? The other part is just the number of workers, right? So if there's an increase in the number of workers, obviously the supply of workers is going to shift out. If there's a decrease in the number of workers, then supply is going to shift inwards, right? We are seeing this in terms of Ukraine, right? Ukraine and Russia, but mostly Ukraine, had a large outflow of people at the beginning of the war, right? And so as a result, it's more difficult, and you're going to have to pay higher wages because of the fact that there are just fewer workers that are staying in Ukraine, right? So there would be fewer workers and then higher wages. And lastly would be, some sort of government policies, right? So, government policy that makes it either easier or more difficult. If they make it easier, then the supply is going to shift out. If they make it more difficult on you, if the liability, this is mostly kind of liability stuff, right? If all of a sudden the job that you've been doing forever, now you're liable for, something that, might not be out of your control, or might be something that, just typically happens, right? But the laws changed, and now, now since you're the construction manager, you're liable if somebody falls off the I-beam or whatever the case may be, right? So if there's a change in the government policy, there might be people that shift out of that labor market as a result, right? So government policies can influence the supply of labor in various ways. Mostly, though, when we talk about labor markets and things like that, right, we're going to be talking about demand shifts, right? I would say probably, 7 out of 10 of the problems that you're going to see, or examples you're going to see, have to do with demand shifts, right? One of the big ones is our, demand for output, right? Anytime the demand for whatever that particular good increases, then the producers, the employers, seeing that, there's more old people, there's people that are living longer, and they're having more complications. So as a result, there's an increased demand for medical services. Therefore, there's an increased demand for the labor that goes into providing those medical services. Apologies. Education and training. So if all of a sudden the firm starts to provide education and training for the workers, right, then that's going to cause there to be a shift in demand. Or if they eliminate the requirements for education and training. Technology. If all of a sudden you are on the auto line, and there's new robots, there's new automation that come in, right, that's going to be a significant shift inwards in labor. The other one that I could think of with technology, right, self-driving cars, right? So as self-driving cars become a thing, the demand for truck drivers, the labor demand for truck drivers, is going to decrease significantly and result in a lower equilibrium wage and fewer truck drivers employed in the future.
Self-checkout too, right?
Yes, very good. Self-checkout. The McDonald's app, right? The fact that you can order stuff with the McDonald's, or the little kiosks in McDonald's, right? Every time you use that, that's one less person that is needed inside there taking orders, answering the phone, so on and so forth, right? So self-checkout, automation by using the apps and stuff like that, all of this stuff decreases the demand for the labor. Absolutely. Very good point, Brian. The number of companies, right? So if you are in a situation where, all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of companies, right, the demand for labor is going to increase. So I'm kind of thinking of like Silicon Valley or something, right? So, when the tech industry popped, the demand for labor in that particular, whatever app development, right? There was a period there where everybody was developing the next Uber, right? It was like, I'm going to make an Uber of this. I'm going to make an Uber of this. And so as a result of the increase in startups and stuff like that in Silicon Valley, there's a shift outwards in the demand curve and an expected rise in the equilibrium wage and the number of people employed in the app programming sector. And kind of in the same line of technology, right? The price and availability of other inputs, right? So if it becomes cheaper, let's say that you are part of a firm that is, making skateboards or something, right? And let's say that, the ball, or maybe not skateboards. Skateboards have ball bearings or something like that, right? And let's say that, let's say you're making the bearings, right? The little ball bearings or whatever, the parts of the trucks and the skateboard. And all of a sudden, there's some foreign company that makes perfect ball bearings and perfect, trucks and stuff like that, and they're really, really cheap, right? Well, the demand for your labor of making that particular part of that product is going to evaporate, right? So anytime the price or availability of other inputs changes, this could have an impact on the demand for labor of whatever it is that you're doing, if we're thinking about that example there. So this brings us to our exercise, which some of you already did, which is wonderful, but the rest of you, please do it for class on Friday and turn it in at the beginning of class on Friday. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of walk you through one right now, right? So we will go to the internet. We will go to bls.gov/the Occupational Outlook Handbook. And we will pick either a random job or, sorry, it doesn't always go right there. So we can pick this featured up, this one changes all the time, or you can go and find one that you are interested in, right? You know, this could be good research for, you know, I want to do this, right? You can go ahead and take a look at the profile. In 2021, for electronic and electrical engineers, they made about, we'll round that up to $49 per hour. So $49 per hour at 300,000 workers. And we expect there to be a employment change of 10,000 extra workers in the next 10 years. And if we also take a look, sometimes they have projections about the wage, but I don't think they have it here. Yeah, they tell us the median wage, but they don't tell us the outlook for the wage. But again, most of these are going to be demand shifts, right? I'm not going to be grading you on whether or not you are doing a supply or demand shift. I'm going to be grading you on whether or not you accurately labeled what I asked you to label, and kind of did the exercise, right? So let's take some notes. I'm just going to take some notes on my other screen here. So we've got $49 an hour. We've got 300,000 right now, and we've got 10,000 increasing in the next 10 years. So now that I have that information, I can go ahead and I can create, and again, it doesn't need to be, to scale or anything like that. But I've got my labor demand. I've got my labor supply. And I've got my equilibrium wage at $49 an hour. So this actually should not be price. This should be wage. And this is going to be my quantity of laborers, right? So we could also label this my number of workers. And so right now we are told that there are 300,000 electrical engineers. I can spell. And we are told that there is going to be an increase in the next 10 years of 10,000, right? So we need the new equilibrium to be on this side of the old equilibrium, right? There are two ways for us to do this. Let's go ahead and do it what I would say the less correct way. The less correct way, but I would still give you full points if you did it all correctly, is to say that the supply of labor is going to shift outwards. That, as a result, you can make something up, right? You could even say something like, I don't know if you guys have been following the whole ChatGPT AI kind of controversy kind of situation, right? Like, so, you could think about this as for electrical engineers, there's a lot of education that's required, right? So maybe as a result of, AI tools to help these electrical engineers study and actually complete their engineering degree, there's going to be an increase in the number of electrical engineers that are just available and willing to work, right? So remember, the supply has to do with us, with households selling our time and energy. The other way that we could do it, okay, so let's finish this way though. So if we did this, then we would have our new equilibrium, and we would kind of finger fudge that a little bit, right? And we would say it's 310K, and then we would, and here you can just do W double star. Like if you want, you could say, I estimate it's going to be, $46 or something like that, right? Compared to 49. But again, all I'm really looking for is labeling things accurately and showing that the wage is decreasing. in this particular example, right? Now, because of the fact that the wage is decreasing, that's part of why I think this is the less correct way to do this, right? Again, this is correct. If you were to do this and have all this stuff labeled, you would get full credit on the assignment that's going to be due first thing on Friday. That'll be for attendance for last Friday. I know, kind of confusing. And the more correct way, and then we're going to go do our Kahoot, which will be on our reading, which will be on elasticity. So that'll be fun to see how much we know on elasticity just from reading. The other way that we could do it is we could say that the demand is going to increase, right? That as there is a increased demand for consumer electronics, right? I love my consumer electronics. And so an increased demand for consumer electronics, and again, I'd probably fudge that and just kind of redraw this. I would say that, and then I would just label this 310K, and then I would label this some sort of W star that is obviously higher. So to me, right, electrical engineers are most likely going to be having real wage increases in the future rather than when we had a supply shift, it was a real wage decrease. But again, I don't care what you shift, right? Just shift something and tell me why, and then show me the resulting employment projection and show me what the estimated impact will be on wage, okay? It doesn't need to necessarily, like, again, if you would have done the supply one and told me that the wage is going to go down, you would have gotten full credit for the assignment. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay, so you just have to go to the Occupational Handbook, find any career, get those 3 bits of information, and then inform your graph with those bits of information. Sweet. And I'll also make sure to upload this onto YouTube right away so that you guys can rewatch this. And it's got sound on, so that helps. All right, let's go do our Kahoot.